Hey guys, back with another video. This time it's a little different than what we've been doing before. I want to cover creating a hair groom from scratch. Now all this time we've been kind of covering the different settings and features of hair grooms in Blender, but this time we're gonna create something from scratch, and I have written about this in my part 2 of my insanely large article about hair grooms and how to create them in Blender and export them down in an engine. And today we're gonna tackle an Afro hairstyle from beginning to end. So this will be really helpful for you to understand how to use all the different features. Okay. And obviously I'll edit this video slightly in case it takes a little too long, so I can just cover the essential bits. But I'll try to keep as much as possible. Okay, so the scene we have today in Blender is something like this. I have already set up a bust. Okay, and this is something I got from Sketchfab, and I'll put a link in the description to find the artist who created this. I've also created a scalp object, which will be the emitter of the particle system. You don't need this, but I like to keep this. Sometimes it helps keep things a little easier to control. So I'm using it. Okay, and I also have here in if you've been doing a lot of artwork, you might be familiar with PureF, and PureF is just an app that allows you to drag and drop images into a infinite board and create like a sort of reference board, which I've done here. And I've collected a couple of images of Afro type hairstyles, and I've done this because if you want to make something look realistic, trust me, you're going to need some references. You can try to do it out of your memory, but you're not going to get the results you like or results that look very good unless you've done it a million times already. And having reference can help you sort of figure out all the little details that you need to add, which you definitely wouldn't remember if you never, if you're just trying to go off memory. I also have my tea here, and let's get started. Okay, the process that we're going to take is, first what we're going to do is we're going to go from we're going to try to model sort of the main shapes, okay, the large main shapes. Okay, and then we're gonna go into the medium shapes, and then we're gonna try to model the micro detail, the micro shapes. If you zoom into some of these images, you can see that these have some pretty micro detail. They're not just okay, they're not super high resolution, but what you're gonna do. Okay, and if you're wondering where I got these, it's just Pinterest. You can just find anything on Pinterest, or you can just look up photography websites like Unsplash or whatever, and get some reference. But now I just search Pinterest because it's a lot easier to search Pinterest for reference images than any other place. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, I'm not gonna try to replicate any specific style. My goal here is to try to replicate a style that would sort of suit all of these. Or rather, if I were to put my style here, it would kind of fit in with everything else. So it's definitely gonna have to look like an Afro style and gather some of these other details you might notice. Okay, so let's start by describing what we're seeing here. Now, if you look at most of these images, first of all, it's a really good idea to Google how an Afro is sort of originates, and it's a hairstyle that is primarily due to sort of African American, the African subcontinent. People from the African subcontinent, African continent, they tend to have this hairstyle. It's like genetic to them, and this hairstyle exists because of the curls. Okay, really tight curls, and it tends to grow in this way naturally. Okay, obviously some people could maybe I don't know, maybe they can make it happen, but with various hairstyling products, but and control how it looks, but it's generally a natural way of growing. But really the shape of it has to do with the fact that these little, like these this huge shape is actually constructed by many smaller structures, which can be very easily viewed. Here you can see that there's just sort of these clumps of hair, okay, and they are also, like, if you zoom into that, you'll see that they are actually made out of very tiny curls, okay, small little curls, and that's what gives it this shape and structure. So we're going to try to replicate that by recreating it step by step. Okay, so let's just take a quick look again. So what I'm going to create is something that looks a little like this, and a little like this, and maybe a little like this. Okay, so we'll try to get something that would fit into this rather than an exact copy. Okay. Okay, so the first step is to add a particle system, and you can do that by going to the particle properties and add a particle system. And I'm going to rename this like I usually do. Let's call this Afro. Okay, and I'm going to rename it here as well, Afro. This is the particle system name on the object, and this is the particle system itself. It's the particle system name, so you can actually use this again in other objects if you want. And I'm going to switch this from emitter to hair, and as you can see immediately, it's way too long. So let's just go down to something like this. Decreasing the hair length to 0.5 meters, so it's somewhat reasonable with the size of the head. And that's all I'm going to do for the emission for now. Okay, I'm going to try to avoid using particle edits because I want to get this shape as much as possible without particle edits, and we'll see if we need particle edits later. Okay, the first step, I think, is to try to get this main sort of, the fact that in every style, if you notice, whether it's this one, you can see these smaller clumps. In some ways we've already got the Afro shape, the overall silhouette is that round shape, so we have that already just by default. But then if you want the second level, which is these little clumps, okay, we want to try to get these shapes. How are we going to do that? And whichever style you look at, all of them have those sort of large clumps. How do we get that? Okay, there's a couple of ways we can do that. First of all, I'm going to enable children. That's the first step. Okay, and the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to viewport display, and I'm going to increase the start steps to 8. Okay, and I'm doing this, and I'm also going to disable show emitter. Okay, and I'm doing this because I want to hide the emitter so I don't see that scalp object. I want high resolution, so when I make these changes, it's going to be very visible, especially for curls. We're going to need high resolution. And I enable children because all those settings to control the shape and structure of the hair is under children. Okay, so once I do this, the first thing I want to do is I want to try to part these. One way is with this parting feature. Okay, if I were to just increase the parting, immediately you can see that the hairs sort of clump together, as you can see. And we can play around with the angle, so we can kind of adjust this. I don't know how much we can control this. We can decide how much parting where and all that stuff. But I don't think I want to use parting. I think I want to use virtual parents. Okay, what does virtual parents do? Virtual parents does the same, a very similar thing to parting. It does create like parting-like structures by creating virtual parents scattered around the head, and the other hairs will interpolate according to the virtual appearance. Okay, so it essentially creates a similar effect to parting and disables parting entirely. Okay, in my original attempt of this sort of gave better results, so this is what I'm going to use. Okay, right, let's quickly take a look at our reference one more time, and I'll be jumping in and out of the reference because it's very important to try and try to keep yourself grounded in these references. Otherwise you can do a lot of changes that deviate from the style you're going for if you don't keep looking at your reference. Okay, and I will continuously do that. Okay, all right, so now we got the base round shape by default. We've got some sort of clumping going on. We can increase this clumping even further, I think. Let's see whether this does anything. Nope, doesn't do anything here. One thing I want to do is I want to randomize the length a little bit. If you notice, on styles like this, for example, you have some of these just a little longer than the rest of it, and that can add a little bit of sort of personality to the style. So I'm going to increase the threshold here and decrease the length, and just adjust the threshold, maybe not so much, not too much, just a bit, and that can create a little bit of or a little bit of personality to the hair. So let's just a little bit. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have some variations here, but essentially all our hairs are still pretty straight, and we'll curl them later, but I want to first get the sort of base look down. Okay, and that's the thing about doing anything. You want to break it down into like the major details, medium details, and small details. Okay, when you look at this, you might be thinking, oh, look at all the curls, you gotta get that fast. But that's not a good approach, because you won't be able to get the shape right. So one thing you want to do is try to get the silhouette first, base shape, and then you want to get the other larger shapes, and then you want to get into the small details. Okay, and then what I want to do is I want to go to clumping, and I'm gonna enable clumping by sliding this up, seeing what we can do. Okay, once I bring it all the way up, you'll just see everything becomes like pointy needles, and that's not what we want. You can see it better here. Okay, and I'm just gonna increase the shape so that we get this sort of thicker clumps at the top, and I'm gonna bring the pointy clumps back down a little bit, just so that you know it's not so pointy. Okay, but I want these clumps to be like this, so that I get a little bit more chunkier clumps, and the virtual appearance definitely helps with this. Oh, we can actually adjust this even further. Oh yeah, here we go. So when we put the virtual appearance all the way up to 1, we have a lot of virtual appearance, and as we bring this down, the virtual appearance, the number of virtual appearance actually reduces, and this allows us to have more chunkier clumping, okay, or rather parting. Okay, this can also help. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep it somewhere here, and this is another thing that you might definitely encounter, where you go back and forth between the different settings to get what you like. Okay, so in some ways we've already got the secondary details. I'm also going to add clump noise, because as soon as I enable it, it looks a bit crazy, and that's because the clump noise is too high. Let's bring it down to 0, and then we'll press shift and drag this up a little bit, just add a little bit of clump noise, just a bit, because we don't want the clumping to be so uniform. We want it to be a little less uniform. Okay, so this will add a little bit of randomness to the clumping, and that can help really just break things up just a little bit, so it doesn't look too uniform. So if you just turn it off, just adds a little bit more noise there. Okay, but still everything is looking extremely straight, and I'm gonna enable a matte cap just so that things look maybe we can see it a bit better. Maybe this. Just change a few matte. Oh, not that. No, I want something that can be very visible. No. Let's go with this. Okay, this feels a little more visible, I guess. Okay, here we go. So here we have some kind of like very spiky looking, very straight looking afro, but that's not what we want. So now I would say that we've kind of tackled, maybe we can reduce this, which we're going to slightly increase the clump sizes. And now I think we would roughly tackled the base shape and a lot of the smaller details. Now it's time to get into the curl details, and we know that we can do that through kink. And as soon as I enable it, whoa, what happened? Okay, all I did was enable curl. Because why did I enable curl? Why didn't I do radial or anything? Because when I researched this a little bit, and by research I just mean went through Wikipedia, I found that this hairstyle is actually caused by curls. So it makes sense that I use a curl kink type. Okay, but it doesn't look anything like an afro. It kind of looks cool, but it doesn't look like an afro. So how do we get it to look right? And this is because the curls are humongous. So let's just tone it down quite a bit. Okay, much smaller in amplitude, and as you know, the amplitude just determines how much it's curling or spiraling. You know, how far, how big, how the radius of the spirals for the curls. Okay, and it looks wavy. It doesn't look like curls though, and this is one of the reasons why I increased the viewport display strand steps quite high. It's because otherwise this is not going to look right. When I increase the frequency, when I start to increase the frequency, you can start to see things looking a little more curly. Okay, and you can immediately start to see it's a bit curlier, but we might want a lot more curls than this. Okay. Maybe we can turn the amplitude down even further and then get it to curl even more. 25, I don't know. That looks kind of cool. Okay, so now we're kind of getting there. We could probably turn this up some more. Alright. There we go. Nice. Okay. Now I'm going to experiment a little bit with some of these other settings. Okay, the flatness, let's see what that does. Flattens them out. That's not what we want. Just turn it down. Maybe just look at it from here. Maybe just a bit, just to add a little bit of different shapes. What does shape do? Definitely not what I want to. Yeah, let's just keep that at 0. We don't want that. Maybe a little bit, so that the curls start a bit ahead and not just right off the bat. And now we kinda have the shape, but we can probably adjust this by reducing virtual appearance. And whoa, what do we have here? Okay, kinda got a Goku hairstyle right there. Okay, I think this makes a lot more sense. Okay, so we kinda have it, kinda do. Let's look at our reference one last time. Over here I can see now that this is an interesting shape. So you have quite a lot of hair, that's true, but we also have some variation in heights of the hair in different regions. So if you really look at this, for example, this hairstyle, you might have larger, taller clumps or regions which are a little bit longer here, but then shorter in these areas. And we can do this. We can adjust this by using vertex groups. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the scalp, and I'm just gonna temporarily disable our Afro, and it immediately disappears. But that's because when we go to viewport display, we just re-enable show emitter. As you can see, we want to see the emitter for now, and we're gonna go to vertex group. We're gonna click on the emitter. We're gonna go into edit mode, and we're gonna create a vertex group, and we're gonna call it density, and maybe another one called length. Okay, I'm just gonna assign everything to the length. Okay, and I'm not 100% sure I'm going to use density, but I just wanted to add just in case I do. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to weight paint mode. Okay, and then I'm going to take my drawing tablet pen, just wipe the dust off my tablet because that happens every day. Whoa, there's a lot of dust. And then I'm going to sort of color onto this where I want the length to be longer or shorter. Okay, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select my brush here. In case you don't know what these are, this is the draw brush, and you can change the type. You can make it add, darken, draw, lighten. I just want to subtract, and I'm going to make this something like 0.3. So it's going to subtract 0.3 based on the strength that I use my pen on. Oops. Okay. And as you can see, as I draw with my oops, let's undo that. For now, I'm just going to enable. I don't know if this works. No, it doesn't work. Okay, so that doesn't work. No, I'm just gonna draw here, and just what I'm doing is I'm lightening the length in these areas. So I'm just gonna reduce the length in this front area a little bit, and this may not work exactly. This is an artistic process here. I'm just thinking, okay, I want it to be a bit lighter on this side, and I want it to be a little lighter in the back a little bit. Whoa, what is happening? There we go. Okay, and just in the bottom, and then I might want to have a little bit of lighter chunks in these areas. Okay, I'm just scribbling about it. I'm just going to see what's going to happen. I'm not 100% sure this is. I might just have to reset this whole thing, but I just want to see what we can do. Okay, now the weight painting mode is kind of not really done, but kind of done. Let's re-enable this. Nothing happened, and that's because even though we colored the vertex group, we didn't actually enable it. And I'm gonna put the length vertex group, and I did that because I want some sections to be shorter, some sections to be longer, and you can see that it is shorter, but not by much. So we can go back into vertex weight paint. Okay, and we can continue painting. Now you notice that I didn't disable the particle system because I want to see the effect, but I also find it much slower to do this way because I'm editing quite a lot of hairs. Okay, you can make this a little easier by bringing down the viewport display amount. I can kind of bring it down a little bit. Okay. Okay. Now we kind of got a little bit of a messier look, and I'll show you a little trick. Okay, I'm just going to disable this. Now we got a little bit of patchiness here. We can smooth this out by pressing F3 and typing in smooth, and you can see weight smooth. We can enable this weight smooth mode, okay, and allow us to smooth. Whoa, disable that. Okay, and we can allow us to smooth this a little bit. Ugh, come on, just a bit. Okay, it keeps enabling this every time I disable, but basically what it does is it smooths out this effect, the weights, you know, so that can help smooth out the transitions a little bit and make things sort of flow a little bit more smoothly rather than have such a sharp cut. That's a little weight painting trick for you. Okay, so we have to a great extent achieved a very curly but also quite straight looking afro look. It doesn't quite resemble these things, it doesn't give the sort of random movement, but before we get to that, we'll address one last thing on the micro scale. Let's bring this back up. Okay, I want to increase the roughness of this. Okay, and I'm going to do that by using this random roughness, and as I increase this, it's too big, so let's just bring this down to a really small value. Actually, that's a bit too small. And you can see what it does. It really roughens this the curls. Okay, this might be a bit too much, so let's bring this even further. Okay, so this is what we have, and by increasing the roughness, we actually distort these curls a little bit, making them a little rougher. Okay, and that can resemble reference quite a bit more, because this is not like perfectly smooth curls. Okay, none of these are like perfectly smooth curls. They're a little rough here and there, all over the place. So we want to increase this roughness, and the reason I'm using the random roughness setting instead of the uniform is because I don't want it to be uniform. I want it to be random, the roughness of this hair. Okay, there we go. So we have to a great extent achieved an afro look. In fact, this might in fact fit in to our image. But we can take it further. Okay, now, until now everything we've done is non-destructive, meaning that every change can easily be undone, but I want to add in some manual variations, just because when you look at all of these hairs, a lot of what I has, even though we've randomized a lot of elements, we've randomized the length. I didn't end up using the density, but we did randomize the length by using Vertex or Vertex group. We use roughness for these micro randomness. We use virtual parents for the clumping, and we even used clumping noise to help randomize the clumps even further, but it's still quite uniform, like especially the shapes. Okay, so we can slightly introduce a little bit more interesting shapes by manually painting the particles, which is what I said I wouldn't do, but I'm going to do it. Let's go to object this mode selector and select particle edits, and as soon as I do that, you see this menu. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to select our comb, make the comb a bit bigger. I'm also going to enable the tip selection mode, so I can only select the tips. You can see here it's just the tips. I'm going to use my pen again, and I'm going to just bend them in different directions a little bit. Maybe I'm going to reduce this size so you can get a little bit more fine-tuned control. Okay, and the reason I'm doing this is because I just want a little bit more random starting points. Okay. If this doesn't work, I can always just delete the edit and restart. Okay, and that happens more often than you think. Deleting everything and starting again. Very common. Well, okay. This might look a little uniform here. Right. Great. Let's go back to object mode and we can immediately see things start to look a little bit more different. Okay, but I still feel like I could do a better job. This time I'm going to select the second mode and I'm going to, I wonder whether this would work. I haven't tried this. Oh, it kind of does. Okay, I'm just gonna tilt these hairs down a little bit. Oh, one thing you want to be really careful about when you're doing particle edit modes is not to disturb the hairs that's too close to the scalp, because sometimes that can have weird results. Alright, that's fantastic, and that looks good, but it can look even better. And this is how we're going to do this. Now we're going to introduce and I'm going to save first because this could crash the computer. I'm going to introduce a little bit of gravity. Okay, and we're going to use hair dynamics for this. We're going to enable hair dynamics. I'm just going to increase the quality steps to something like 15. Oh, let's keep it at 5 for now and just see how things work. Let's just press play and see how the hair collapses on itself. It's a bit fast. I like it, but I feel like we could definitely compare it with our reference images. By the way, if you want to compare these two, PRF has a nice shortcut. Control-Shift-A will make sure that this stays there, so I can just compare my style with references. Okay, I feel like we're roughly there. I feel like maybe we need to reduce the length a little bit more in some areas. Yeah, definitely. So let me work on that. Maybe a little bit more. You can press Control-Shift-A to get rid of this again. A little bit more weight painting. Hopefully we are selecting length. Great, yes. And then it's on subtract mode. Take my pen again and just, I'm just gonna go back, because if we do it from here, we might have some, because the frames are baked or at least cached, sometimes you won't see a change. Okay, so we may have to rebake it, and that'll help a lot. Sometimes you might go a little overboard, so you can change the brush to average, and I'll show you what that does. Disable this, just averages out the look here, so it kind of smoothens things out. It's a smoothing tool. If you just go a little bit too far with the effect. Okay, and I'm just going to take the average again and just average things out. Boom. Okay. Nice. Let's see what we got. I'm gonna press play a little bit. I'm just gonna let it fall for a bit. I'm really loving this. I feel like it looks better than my original. And there we have it. We got a pretty good Afro look. Now, if you keep playing this, it might fall too much. Well, if this is what you want to go for, you could definitely do that. But it's not what I want. I want something this look. And I feel like the front is still too long, so I'm gonna do a little bit more vertex painting. Okay, or rather weight painting, not vertex painting, my bad. Let's subtract a bit more in this area. And what I'm doing here is, by reducing the weight, I'm actually reducing the length in these areas. Let's just average it out again so that we have something. There we go. And I did that because I want to see the character's eyes. I don't want it to sort of fade behind this too much. Okay, so it seems like around frame 12 is where I wanna stop it. One thing, I want the hairs to collide with this, so I'm just gonna make this a collider. Collisions, back, and let's dramatically increase the quality of this. Well, not dramatically, but let's go to collisions, zero that out, increase that to like 15, increase this to like 15, and then I'm gonna bake it because I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Just a frame 12 bake. Okay, let that bake. Okay, let's go to frame 12. Nope. There we go. Frame 12. There we go. There's a little bit of a hanging piece here, but that looks okay, I guess. Maybe we can just go back a bit. Looks kind of cool. Of course, you might have preferred the look here at one, and that's fine. You know, this is an artistic choice. I think I like this. I like it when it's down a bit because I definitely I feel like, you know, gravity adds a sort of, it makes it feel like, okay, there's gravity acting on this, because there is. I just stopped it at 10 frames instead of continuing it. Now if you were to export it like this into Unreal Engine, this would be the default look, and you can adjust the stiffness in Unreal Engine and it will look like this. Or you could just, you know, render it this way. If you want the gravity to be controlled within Blender, you would have to adjust the stiffness setting and structure here, and that can help as well. The stiffness and the damping settings, both of these can help you prevent it from being too much, but I like this. Okay, I like the way it looks here. One last thing we could do is, if you notice, these strands are very thick, and we can control that with our scalp. Okay, by looking at the hair shape. If you notice, the hair shape, okay, I wonder whether it's more visible here. Just ignore that. Is the scale, the diameter root versus the tip, the scale, and the diameter scale. We can reduce this. We can make this like 10 times smaller, and this would make everything look thinner. Okay, maybe that's not what we want. Maybe 5 times smaller. Okay, so the strands look thinner, and this can help add a little bit of realism. Okay, right now the children is set to 10. If we the display amount, so that's what we're seeing here. So let's see what 20 looks like. Sometimes what you see isn't what you're gonna get when you render it. If you increase it too much, you might realize that it looks too much hair, right? And that's what happens to me a lot. I tend to rely on the display amount without realizing that the render amount is going to be significantly more, and things don't look quite right, like this. But this could definitely help add a little bit more. I think 45 might be fine. I'm just going to go back to 10. Okay, and it depends on what you want to do. Now if I increase this to 45, you'll see that the clumps become far more dense, so it looks more similar to this or this. But if you want it to look less dense, it'll look more similar to this, or even somewhere in between would be this. So depending on what you're going for, the number of children will have to vary. So if you're using 10, you achieve something similar to this, what you see here. But if you use 45, which I've set for the render, it will achieve something similar to this or this, which is far more dense and way less small hairs sticking out. And I feel like maybe 35 is where I want to be at for the render. Okay, and that's it. That's how you create a hairstyle like this. And obviously you can vary the colors and things like that. You can work on that forever to get a different look. I feel like this is kind of cool, so I think I'm gonna go with this. I hope this kind of gave you an idea of the workflow that you would approach. Now in this particular case, if I were to recap what I have done, I kind of jumped around a little bit with that process, but the first step always starts with some research. You research and figure out, how does this hairstyle originate in real life? And once you have an idea how it grows in real life, how is the structure of it, the better you understand how things look like in real life, the better your results will be. Admittedly, I didn't do a whole lot of research. I just searched like Wikipedia, but I figured out enough to kind of help me create this result. Now the second stage is to collect references, which I've done here, and you can use PRF, a free app, to collect them. You can just drag and drop images onto your reference board like I've done here, and you can see I have a bunch of them collected. And you would probably search websites like Pinterest and just type in the search term and just grab whatever you like, whatever you want, and grab a few different ones, preferably things from different angles. Now admittedly, I haven't done that great a job of getting different angles, but this particular style is pretty uniform from all the angles, so it worked out. But try to get side view, back view, top view as much as you can. Different angles will definitely help, and get an idea. And then you want to study these references and try to break it down into the big, medium, and small details. So if you'll recap big, medium, small details here, this is the overall silhouette, the rounder shapes with some bumpiness. That's the overall silhouette, like a cloud sort of thing. Then the secondary details might be the fact that these shapes tend to be clumped into sort of larger clumps of hair, and they tend to be like tendrils almost, and depending on which style you're looking at, if you look at this, the tendrils are a little bit smaller and more frequent, whereas here it's a little bit bigger and slightly less frequent. whereas here it's much more random, or here it's varying in size, it's not so uniform. So each of these things will inform you how things are supposed to look and what you're going for. Then finally, the micro details would be how does the texture of it look? Oh, a lot of curls, and it's a bit rough. It's not perfectly smooth curls. It's very rough curls, and there's a lot of intersections. And those are the big, medium, and small details, sometimes called primary, secondary, and tertiary details. And by defining it in this way, you can improve how you're going to approach this, because the tools available to you can help you achieve each level. And it's ideal to go from big or primary details to secondary details or medium details, and then finally to small or tertiary details. That's how you would ideally go about it, and then you can go back to each stage and adjust. But I kind of went back and forth between them, but roughly I stuck to the big details first, medium details second, tertiary details last, or micro details last, and then I went and adjusted in between them. I kind of tweaked the big details again, I tweaked the medium details again, and so on. And you can approach it that way, and that way you will actually achieve the result you want. And finally, you might want to keep things non-destructive as much as possible, unless you can't avoid it. Maybe some of the other styles we might start with a destructive edit, like a particle edit, and then move on to non-destructive methods. But in this particular style, we didn't have to do that. And finally, you definitely want to have a little patience, because you might be doing this 100 times before you get the right result. Some of these hairstyles will come pretty quickly, some of them will take a lot of time to just get the look right. So don't feel too bad about that. It does take a little time. So that's it, guys. Hope you like this. Catch you in the next one.